let me ask you first. Obviously this tour brings you to town. What was the motive for the tour, and what I guess the idea behind it, and why you're doing it?
Well, I was talking with Haley Barber some time back, and he said that if you want to win statewide elections, and you want to win congressional districts, you want to win senatorial or state senatorial races, some races, you got to have a strong state committee. And this is a state committee getting out there, going around the state and campaigning for our assembly candidates, our congressional candidates, our state senate candidates, our gubernatorial, lieutenant gubernatorial candidates. That's what we've done on this tour. We've done 1,000 miles on this by the time it's over. In 2 days, we'll cover 4 congressional candidates, 4 assembly candidates, 1 state senate candidate, our gubernatorial candidate, who were with Carl Palladino last night, and Greg Edwards, who's our lieutenant gubernatorial candidate. And of course, here we're campaigning with Richard Hanna, who is the congressional candidate for the 24th district, and running the second time around, as they say in politics, second time's a charm. This time you're going to win, Richard.
I think so too.
What are your thoughts? We'll go statewide for a minute here, but what are your thoughts on the statewide ticket? We're out of the primaries and everything. How strong do you believe it is, and a good chance to win a lot of seats?
We had a bottoms-up grassroots process that we ran, where different candidates at different times were up or down, and candidates developed, particularly since we were starting from scratch here. We have no statewide offices for the first time since the 1930s, and for that reason we have candidates who are, in some cases, completely new to what it is to be running for an office. And having gone through this process of, first of all, screenings when anyone could, starting at the start of this year, we had regional screenings, statewide offices, interviewed with the local county chairs and delegates to the convention. Then we had an open convention where the candidates were nominated, and conversation back and forth, and they spoke with the delegates, went through that process. And it's a little bit different than the national process, because that's just one total point in the full process. And then some of the candidates who didn't get on the ballot at the convention then petitioned their way onto the ballot, including Carl Palladino and Joe Dioguardi, and they clawed their way back in. They went out and spoke to a lot of after they got on the ballot, spoke to a lot of the potential Republican voters. We had a huge turnout, record turnout, almost 500,000 Republicans voted in the primary, and in the end they decided who our candidates would be, and so that's the process we went through, and that process has produced from our field of, and sometimes inexperienced candidates who have gone through the fire, the ups and downs of politics, and are now really genuine candidates who are ready to do the jobs that they are nominated for the people of New York State.
Obviously, you touched on traveling for assembly and senate candidates too. Share your thoughts on your chances to take back. I know the state senate's obviously a big priority. You have a candidate right here in Central New York, Andrew Russo. What do you think your chances are?
Andrew Russo, now he went through his own nomination and primary process here against Danny Lika, and Andy Russo, he did a great job. Fought hard. He is again went through a good primary battle. Dan Lika has endorsed him right away, and we're all unified going into the general election here in the 49th senatorial district, and I've been up here campaigning with Andy Russo, and he's going to be a great state senator. I think he's going to win this election. This is one of the 6 or 7 districts that we can win this time around, and we will get back a majority in the state. So we have to get back a majority in the state for the sake of upstate New York. Upstate New York is not represented in Albany at all. The 3 Democratic leaders in the state senate all come from Manhattan. The governor comes from Manhattan. The attorney general comes from Manhattan, and the speaker of the assembly comes from Manhattan. That really stacks the deck against upstate New York. The Republican present Republican minority in the state Senate comes all from all over upstate New York. By elect Andy Rousseau and take over several of those Democratic seats, win a Republican majority, that Republican majority will represent upstate New York the way it should be represented in Albany.
My last question for you, obviously you're here for Richard today. You've gone around and supported other congressional candidates. Why is it important for you to support these congressional candidates like Richard, who are, in many cases in New York, in very close races?
Well, there are lots of ways we give support. Support by campaigning like this for them and talking to the local troops as we did here and letting them know how important this is in Washington. I've spent a little bit of time in Washington myself in the Reagan administration and in the Nixon administration, and I know a little bit about Washington. And it's just very important, given the big government programs that Obama has been imposing on the American people. His Obamacare, for example, is the only big social program that has been passed and signed by the president since World War II, that was passed with bipartisan opposition to it. 34 Democrats voted against Obamacare, and more would have voted against it, but for big slices of pork that they were bribed with in order to vote for it. The American people don't want Obamacare, and they don't want this takeover of one-fifth of the Americans' gross national product. It needs to be repealed, and and there are a number of other programs like that are going into place, whether it is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, that is now looking at Marcellus Shale, and they're thinking about getting involved in that. That's going to govern up more so it doesn't get developed the way it should be. It should be developed so that we can have a good but environmentally safe industry here in Central and New York and the Southern Tier. We need to get that on the right track. To do that, we need to have a Republican majority in the House of Representatives, and that's going to happen this time around. It's very important to elect Richard Hanna as part of that Republican majority, and that's going to mean a lot to the 24th Congressional District and the people of Central New York to have a representative in the majority in the House of Representatives who is going to be a voice for sanity in government, and also to represent the Central New York the way it should be represented.
Anything else you'd like to add?
This is a very exciting time. The other party controls everything in Washington now and everything in Albany, and they are messing up in both places. The corruption in Albany is about as bad as it gets. The Democrats' gubernatorial candidate, Andrew Cuomo, said he was going to be the sheriff of State Street when he came in 4 years ago. He was going to make sure there wasn't any corruption in Albany. Well, by golly, take a look at Albany now, where you've got the governor's under investigation, the controller's under investigation, all three leaders in the state Senate, the Democratic leaders there, are either under investigation, accused of impeding investigation. The only guy who's actually doing something there is Shelley Silver, and he was elected by several thousand votes in the lower portion. Much broader mandate, and that means electing a Republican governor Carl Palladino, will represent all of New York State. He comes from Western New York, which presently doesn't have any representation in Albany, among the leadership in Albany. Same thing with taking back, as we were discussing, the state Senate. Same with electing a larger Republican minority in the Assembly, so that they can have an impact on the policy making there. We get a balanced policy making coming out of the Assembly. All these things are important, having balanced, good, fiscally responsible government in Albany. most important thing this year is having fiscally responsible government in Albany and in Washington. If there's any issue, that is the issue that the people of New York State and the people of America are concerned about. That's what the Republican Party is about. We're the party of fiscal conservatives. That's what Richard Hanna is. He's a fiscal conservative. And when you have a $1.5 trillion deficit each year going forward in the federal government, you got a $15 billion deficit the next elected governor of New York State is going to have to face. And New York State being one of the highest taxed, if not the highest taxed state in the United States, we can't increase taxes any longer. We've got to cut spending. Cutting spending is what Republicans do. That's what the people of New York State wants. That's why we're going to be electing Republicans to serve in Albany, and that's why we're going to elect Richard Hanna to Congress along with many other Republicans, because the people of America, the people of New York State understand, the people of the 24th District, the congressional district understand, the people of Central New York understand that we've got to cut spending and get good, solid, efficient, incorruptible folks in government. That's Richard Hanna.